This is really exciting because it's our first guest, and Danica joins us from Vancouver. She's a freelance writer and editor, a writing coach in Vancouver. And her current projects include she's writing a collection of essays based on her experience of opening an indie bookstore during the pandemic. She's also developing a cookbook proposal for an award-winning pastry chef and creating her online writing classes at Write with Danica, which is an absolutely amazing, jam-packed Substack with Danica giving you just the most perfect writing advice and tips and encouragement. So thrilled that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm so happy to be the first guest. I didn't know I was the first one.
Everyone else said no.
That's what the MFA was like. I was waitlisted. I think I was waitlisted a little bit, and then they let me in, and I was like, "Yay!" And then I got there for the first, and they were like, and all of the people were like, "Oh, they'd been asking me to come, but I didn't feel like it." But then I changed my mind, and I was like, "Oh, after they got everyone they wanted, then they like, fill a seat."
This is how Danica and I met, was we both did an MFA in creative nonfiction at University King's College out in Halifax, and I lucked out. But that's really fascinating to me because I have never heard that story, Danica, and I too was waitlisted.
Wow.
And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're going to have another chat about that.
I wonder who was cooler than you guys.
Well, that's what I'm kind of trawling through in my memory. And
I think they were all from Toronto. Maybe us Westerners are just a little bit.
An afterthought.
Yeah.
Well, I don't feel guilty for going, but I feel guilty about a lot of things in general. Danica, can I share what you said when I asked you about being a guest here?
Yes.
Because it was perfect. So I asked her, Amy, about being a guest, and she said, actually, I'm making a guilt list. When you first asked me, I felt a little worried that I might not be a good guest because I don't feel guilty about much. I'm pretty good at unapologetically rejecting the expectations that come at me from the outside.
I love that.
And I thought that was how I thought you just move through life and in the kindest, but also just really self-assured way. You don't carry what I feel like most people carry, which is like a little red wagon of just guilt behind you. But then you said something else. You said, you're like, oh, yeah. So,
yeah, listening to you guys made me realize how guilty I feel all the time. Thanks.
I was going to say, would you teach us courses on how not to feel guilty? But I'm sorry that we actually made you aware that, in fact, you were guilty feeling.
Yeah. Like when you guys were talking about like the tipping and there were various things. And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I just, I related to all of it for sure. I'm just as guilty as anyone, I guess, really.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I'm not glad to hear it. But so I guess if you said initially your reaction was that you don't feel guilty about stuff, would you say, is that because of your upbringing, or was guilt not something that was in your home? Because it sure was in mine.
Oh, no, I think it's maybe the opposite a little bit, because I've been reflecting on this the whole past week. Yeah, I think it's because right from, hitting that midlife thing now, looking back right from the get-go, like I moved out of home on my own when I was 18. And then pretty much right away, when I was, 19, 20, I started making decisions for myself that really flew in the face of what the expectations were. And so I've just had a lot of good practice of doing that repeatedly. So I think just by now being, hitting mid-age and just having that as a pattern for so long, it just gets easier.
That's really interesting. So when you started, because I know like little bits of your story, but not the A to B of every single thing. When you started making those decisions that were against what expectations and parents and community kind of would prefer you making, I'm imagining that what led you to make those decisions also meant there wasn't a guilt at the time, right?
No, for sure. There wasn't guilt at the time. There was an awareness that I was making different choices, but I felt rebellious, but in a good way, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That resonates with me, right? Because I also kind of had to, at that same age, and there probably a lot of people at that age, you're supposed to kind of push back and change it up. At the time, though, I think I felt very guilty, but did it anyways. Is that different from your experience, would you say?
No, I think I felt like I was moving in a direction of health. And like I came from it's funny, I'm in a reflecting place anyway. Like my mom is actually here visiting right now, and my dad was here visiting like a month ago. And I haven't spent a lot of time with either of them in my adult life. So, it just makes you like look back and but my parents, like I love them both, and they're both wonderful people. Like it's not to like be like, oh, my upbringing was terrible, but I came out of like family systems that had a ton of like dysfunctional at best, but there was a lot of like abuse, like different adults.
Yeah.
And all the children were like, it was terrible. It was bad, but there was a lot of dysfunction. There was some abuse, but there was also things like poverty and just a lack of life skill. Like, not that there's anything wrong with not having an education, but no one had that. And so no one was encouraged to like pursue those things. And also like there was a ton of divorce. So even just like it was a secular, like there was no faith of any kind. So I actually like, as a young adult, I found God and started going to church and decided to get married. And so I felt like I was moving into more of a healthy, I got educated. I went back to school, like after I had kids young and stuff, but then I went back to school after, which really like all of these things flew in the face of the upbringing that I had. But I felt like I was making good, healthy decisions for myself. So it kind of was a feeling of rebelliousness, but it's not the way that people would normally think.
The standard, I'm going to go get drunk and fall down in the streets and take up smoking and right?
Yeah. And, a lot of the people of my generation in my family are sort of still living those kinds of lives now. And I feel kind of guilty now for having left. Like, I feel like I left people behind a bit. There's a feeling of that.
It's almost like that survivor's guilt, right? Like you got out and they didn't.
Yeah, totally. The opposite of what happens normally, I think.
Yeah, I was expecting you to say, oh, I had like this strict upbringing and then I went and just, and in fact, it's the opposite. So that's very interesting.
Flipped it.
Well, maybe that's why you give that sense of not carrying guilt with you, because the decisions you made were strong, positive, forward motion. And so you can trust your judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, I try. I don't, but I try.
We actually were having a discussion the other day because you said your parents are visiting, and we were actually having that discussion the other day about, and I don't know if you haven't spent a lot of time with your parents in your adult life, are you finding now as they age, our parents Kristen lost her dad, but my parents are in their early 80s and Kristen's mom is in her 70s. And we're finding just a lot of guilt attached to sort of that expectation of what you feel you should be doing for them now at this age, and the caregiving expectation and all that kind of thing. Do you find that that's the case for you?
It's coming. My parents aren't quite as old. They were fairly young when they had me.
Okay.
And so like my mom just retired, and my dad, actually my grandma just retired.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my grandma, she had a farm with her partner, but then she also worked in the community. She had a job, but she needed to keep working just to make ends meet. But she also, watching her life, like looking back, I think having the farm and then working kept her, even as she aged, it kept her strong and active. And yeah, so that's an interesting life lesson. But my parents, my dad's been retired for a few years, but my mom's just retiring now. So, they are starting to face some of these aging things. And I think some of my guilt is more around because they all live in the same town and I left. Like it's a smaller town, it's a little farther away. I feel guilty for saddling my sister because I left. My sister's there. And so she deals with the brunt of it. She's always been closer to them. She was always the favorite child. And I was happy to go off and do my own thing. And it was fine. But now she's having to deal with the brunt of it. And I feel a little bit guilty for having left her with it. But she stayed. But she also chose to stay. So I don't know. That's a hard one.
And that guilt is not on you, because if she has chosen to stay, I guess, she could have made maybe the same choices as you a long time ago.
She could have, but now I feel that now maybe she feels she can't.
Now she's stuck. Yeah. We moved to Kelowna 8 years ago at a point when my parents were still in really good shape. And I left my older sister behind. My brothers don't live anywhere near, and they're not really involved anyway in the caregiving. But I feel the guilt now of my sister being the one. But I also feel guilty because I'm relieved that I did leave, because I know that if I were to have stayed, it would have fallen to me.
Yeah. I know there's like no right answer, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Mhm.
But I also sometimes try to free myself from that feeling, like, because now I have my kids are a little older too. They're young adults, and as I'm moving forward, because I had the bookstore and I went through a difficult divorce, and I sort of, in terms of like money and finances, I sort of like lost everything and I'm starting from scratch. And so now when I think about my future and my retirement and my aging and things, like my primary goal right now is to just not become a burden to my kids. So I'm like, okay, well, my parents also, some of the responsibility for their lives falls on them. And like they should, if they haven't in the past had the foresight to be thinking about their older selves, at least they should be thinking about it now. Like they shouldn't be putting, I don't know, the idea of like the children taking care of the older people, like that's a nice idea, but I think it's an old idea. And I think the past generation and our generation, like we're much more independent and independently minded, which isn't always healthy. But, you also being independent also, puts the onus on you to take care of yourself. I don't know. I'm trying to take care of myself. Maybe my parents should take care of themselves. I don't know. I feel like a jerk saying that.
No, I don't think you should. I actually,
like my mom, when her mother died, they had lived in the city and they were very independent grandparents, lived in a little bungalow. No one helped them with anything. And then my grandma got sick and died fairly quickly. And the day of the funeral, this becomes lore in your head, right? So if my mom was here, she might say, what? No, none of this is correct. But the story I tell myself is that the day of the funeral, my grandpa, who had spent, 50 plus years with his wife, looked forlorn. And my mom asked him about that. And he didn't want to sleep alone at the house. And she said, come stay at our house. And I don't know that he ever went home even for one night. And part of that was because he was also starting, and I don't remember if this was known before the funeral or if it just sort of cropped up, but he was starting to have dementia. So he moved in. There was lots of room in my parents' house, and he had his own room, and he moved in, and my mom looked after him. And I'm not sure, but I want to say about 8 years. And his decline he was never a ton of work, but this was my mom isolated out on the farm. And she did all of the books and answered the phone for the business, the family business. And right as her children are moving out and launching, now her father has moved in. And I remember she had signs that because he would all of a sudden, it was kind of funny, but also heartbreaking, but he would be sitting in his chair looking out over the farm, which was land that he had given her, right? Where she built this house. And he would all of a sudden like launch himself out of his chair and say, where are the cows? And there hadn't been cows since like he was a child. And so she actually ended up just writing on pieces of paper, the cows are put away. And she would just hold up the gate is locked, the barn is locked, right? Just to soothe us, because it must have happened often enough that she felt compelled to write on a piece of paper. So she cared for him, and eventually like home care came to shower him once a week because that was beyond her.
Right.
But for the duration. And I look at that and I think, when she finally had to make the decision to put him in one of those small care homes, right? That's like a house, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like he died really soon after. And I know I don't know, but I'm guessing that the burden of guilt that she couldn't see that through is significant. And so I've always said to her, like, you'll just come live with us. And then, right, as I age, I think I still would honor that. But I don't know, the way we've set our world up, like nothing's easy. She helped me with childcare over the years significantly and was really involved, especially when Stella was little, in my girls' lives. And I think that as hard as it would be to have her with me, the guilt that I would feel if I just put her somewhere I couldn't make that equation work. And that makes me a little bit annoyed because all of a sudden, right, I'm 50 and I feel like life is passing. And if I want to do certain things.
And do you think she would want to or does want to come live with you if it comes to that? Or is that just a self-imposed?
She wants to die alone on the farm right, of some catastrophic event.
Yeah.
Right, as I would rather not, have a slow, gradual, mindless decline.
Yeah.
That would be probably her optimal idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine dying in an old folks home. Like and then what are the trades? What are the options, right? Because Western culture, it says like go off and be independent and do all the things and that's it, right? Like
Yeah.
It
No, for
makes me
sure.
sad that like we've lost the other stuff. I don't want to trade it, but I don't know what to do with all this.
Yeah. And you're making me feel guilty because I would never have my parents come live with us. Like I could not. I would probably smother them in their sleep the first night.
Which could also be a very rational decision, right?
Yeah,
Because people cling to life in ways that aren't great, right? Like we facilitate life far beyond quality.
Yeah, I think, the idea of even visiting, we all love each other. Like we love each other and we can think about each other as like a person and like look at their lives and think about them and who they are and like love and appreciate that person. But spending time together, we don't enjoy each other's company. Like you can feel like even when we're trying to be kind to each other, like there's such a difference in like values and world and just the way like you would like to structure your day or topics that you want to talk about or opinions. Like I think there's a bit of a recognition. Nobody really says it out loud, but everybody kind of feels the same thing, that we just don't enjoy each other's company that much, even though we love each other.
It's like what I say to my kids sometimes, like, I love you very much, but right now I don't really like you.
Well, no, it's not so much that. It's just the enjoyment of time spent. So why would you want to like invite someone in and commit to like years of time spent together if no one is going to have a good time?
Yeah. Like like to me, it's like a big conundrum because my mom is getting more and more sort of just disappointed in the fact that nobody goes to church, right? And we can talk about anything and get along about pretty much everything except for that.
Interesting.
And I don't know, how would that go, right? And would it become that simmering feeling of guilt that just simmered a little bit, almost like turning up the heat on the stove because she's there all the time, right? When she's not here, I don't have to really think about it.
When my parents are here visiting, I feel guilty going off to church. So sometimes I don't. Sometimes I want to go to church and I stay home.
Really?
Interesting.
But then sometimes I'm like, no, I really want to go. So I go and then I feel bad that I left them.
Now, do you think that they want you to feel guilty, or do you think that's just something you've done to yourself, feeling guilty about leaving them if you go to church?
Do they like harass you not to go?
No,
but
I think, like I said before, like all those choices I made when I was young, like even about, and this doesn't come from anything they say to me directly, but it's just sort of, family values where people like say the same messages to each other back and forth all the time. Like in my family, and this is my extended family, like aunts, uncles, cousins, some grandparents, not all of them. But for the most part, there was a lot of talk about like anyone who is educated thinks they're better than us, or anyone who is religious thinks they're better than us. So like I get this feeling that because I made those choices, that they all think that I'm better than them. So when I go off to do something like that, like I feel like I'm being a snob or something.
Yeah.
It highlights the fact that you're better than them, or think that you're better.
Yeah, and I don't.
You're not, and you don't.
It's just a choice. Like it's just something else that I wanted for myself. But
that's very interesting. I'm still actually processing what you said about loving each other and valuing each other, but not enjoying each other's company, because that is something that I think my mom has always wanted, sort of that family, like extended family. And growing up, we had lots of cousins, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. But my mom has often expressed her sadness that she is not close to any of her siblings necessarily, and especially her sister. And my aunt went down a whole other path, became a born again Christian, and really went down a whole other path. And their values just don't align anymore. They get along. But my mom has always expressed her sadness that she's not close to her sister. And it's just funny because it's like she forces time spent together, and she does that with us. It's like when we go to visit, it's never enough time. It wouldn't matter if I spent 10 hours a day with her, if I spent 1 hour with someone else, it just is never enough time for her. And she doesn't recognize, because it's like you say, I love her so much. She loves us so much. And I value her opinion, all those things. But I get to the point where when I'm with her, I am not my best self because I'm giving her shit for things. And I'm like, Mom, you can't. I just feel like I'm parenting because I'm annoyed a lot of the time. And it's almost like if she would recognize that less time spent together might actually equate to better quality of time spent together. It's a really interesting, it's fascinating to me when you say like that your whole family just kind of recognizes that. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish my mom could see that.
I don't know if it's like I recognize it. And I think some of the others are more aware of it and they accept it, but I'm not sure if they've thought it through and really recognized it yet.
But if there's no guilt placed on you from other people about it, then that means that whether they've thought it through or not, it's something that they're okay with, probably.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have one grandma who's still alive, the one who worked for a long time. I think she's probably my favorite family member. And I hardly ever see her. And I even rarely call her. And every time we talk on the phone, we have and I would say out of anyone's company that I enjoy, I probably enjoy her company the most. But every time we talk on the phone, we're both saying, oh, I'm sorry that, it's taken so long to call. I think about you all the time. I miss you. I want to spend time with you. But she says the same thing back to me. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm actually not a very good. And one thing I know about myself, and it's the same with family and friends, I'm not very good at keeping in touch with people. I think about them more often than I actually text or whatever. But part of that is a learned behavior that I got from my mom and my grandma. And I'm like, okay, well, it's funny because I know that my grandma feels the same way and we both feel, but it makes it easier to accept in myself knowing that it's the same. The
other person's expectations are not different.
Yeah. She also thinks about me and misses me and thinks she should call me and then just doesn't get around to it because she's puttering in the garden or whatever.
But I love that because it means you're both living life right now, right? Because it can feel when there's this, what's the right amount to call the person? What's the right amount, right? It sounds like it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's good with my grandma. I do wish that I saw her more, but she lives far away. Seems far away. She lives in Salmon Arm. So, yeah.
So this I did not expect when we started this podcast that I would find new sources of guilt that I just hadn't thought about. Thanks for that, ladies.
Maybe do you guys even want to do this podcast?
I'm rethinking everything actually, because I have in my head a vision of how I want my family to be and feel. And like your mom, Amy, I have this, I want it to be, I don't even know, is it from reading too many novels when I grew up? But I want this loud, big, raucous every Christmas to have it be so hot in here that someone has to go outside and making buckets of food and having people sleep on sofas and just be the place where people want to drop in and my kids bring their friends over. And I have wept at the dinner table and probably am doing something obviously to my children and creating some major guilt because I want a family where my girls adore each other. And they're these just fabulous sisters who I used to tell them when they were little, I said, girls with sisters are so lucky because they move through the world with a potential best friend, right? I have brothers who are not a potential best friend. And my family was divided literally by the cult. And there was, even when there were family events, I was up on the periphery because I couldn't look like I was enjoying these worldly things too much. And so I wanted to build that. And I'll cry if someone fights at the table at Earl's. And it's not because, right? I imagine that my girls feel like I'm just a big emotional baby, right? Who can't control herself. I don't know actually what they think, but that's what I would think if I was 17 and my mom started crying because I was rude to my sister. I'd be like, oh, seriously, woman, get some help. But it is an actual, this is fascinating because it's an actual, I can't not cry because it feels like I didn't build the thing that I wanted to build. And now I'm going to make them feel guilty about it.
Well, you could have a conversation with them about it and be like,
I think
I'm really
perhaps.
tenderhearted. Well, I'm really tenderhearted about conflict between you because my biggest desire has been to see you loving each other. And just saying, like, even where it came from, being like, when like I didn't have that, and it's something I always wanted for myself. So it's something I wanted for you. Parents are always wanting the things for their children that they didn't have. If they, if they can understand that it's something that you
I thought
value
this
so much.
podcast was going to be funny.
It's therapy, Kristen. It's therapy. And it's free.
Oh, good Lord.
But maybe there is, like Danica said, maybe that is a great way to have a conversation with them about that, but also sort of approach it from a place of like, I don't want you to feel the burden of guilt over this.
Yeah.
I just want you to know where I come from and think about, how that could feel to you and what that could mean to you when you're older to have this friendship with your sisters. And that's okay if you don't feel that way, but, just give it some thought, maybe love each other a little more.
Well, and just I maybe kind of know some of the things, right? You kind of know some of the reasons you tend to react this way or that way. And I think I have, identified some of them and can try to change the parts of me that should be changed. But this is like one of those moments where it's like, oh, right, look what you're doing. That's like completely fascinating to me. Because of course I know I'm going to make my kids feel guilty about things. And sometimes it's purposeful, right? Right? It's a tool. It's a technique.
It's a parenting technique. Maybe, as who feel guilty all the time and hate that, maybe our job is to dismantle the guilt for our children. Like, don't put the guilt on the kids.
Yeah.
That's what I've been trying to do. Mm-hmm. Having grown up in a home with so much guilt tripping, we just were like, oh my God, mom's guilt tripping again. I definitely have, it comes out in me and then I'm like, oh, don't do that. And so I have had to have a real awareness, and it still comes out. I mean, it just does, but I try to have an awareness before I put that on my kids. But I know what you mean about wanting, because I think that's all my mom has ever wanted. Like, there are 4 of us. She's only ever wanted us to just all be together and harmonious and happy and with our kids and our spouses and whatever, right? Like, she just loves the idea of a giant family trip.
Oh my gosh. Maybe I could, like, me and your mom could, like,
honestly, if you want to go, she will adopt you, because truly, like, that's all she wants. She just,
my
for
dream.
her. Yep. And like, none of us, we love each other, but we're not the same kind of people. We wouldn't want the same. It's like you said, our schedules, like the things we would do, how we would organize our days. It's not good. Like, it's not the same.
Okay, sorry. My kids are actually on a plane right now. They are going on a big family trip with their dad and his dad. So the kid's grandpa. I think he's paying for the whole family. Like, he has 3 sons and they're all married with kids, grandkids. So he's taking them all to Mexico.
I mean, if someone wanted to pay, I might not say no.
And I am, part of the thing through the divorce for me, if we want to talk about guilt, we could talk about divorce. I went through a period of time where I had this deep grief because we were closer with my in-laws than we were with my family. And so when I initiated this split, and like, I loved my ex's family, and I had this huge like grief, like, because they weren't really my family anymore. We still are friendly and we chat and stuff, but it also coincided with the MFA, which took up all of my vacation time, and then the COVID and the bookstore. So even if I, like, in a past life, I may have visited with them, but there was just no time for visiting. So I've really let go of my that side of the family in the last 6 years since the separation, and I miss them and I love them. But now that my kids are, I missed them a lot, but now my kids are going on this big family trip, and I'm like really thankful that I don't have to go. Because spending, like, as a working adult, you have limited vacation time. Yeah. I don't think I would want to spend like the chunk of my time for a year, my time off, in an all-inclusive resort with in-laws, as much as I like them.
Yeah.
It's a very healthy thing to say.
Everybody wants to do throughout the course of a day. Like, no thanks. I'm like, go have fun with your dad and your family. And I'm like, I get to stay here.
We've brought my mom, and I adore my mom, But like they traveled a bit, but we've brought her on holidays and then consistently, and we brought my dad once too on a cruise. I've consistently felt guilty the whole time I'm on that holiday that should I be hanging out with them or her? Should I be asking her what she wants to do? And then there's this real push pull between like, this is my holiday. I want to do what I want to do. And sometimes I just don't want to do anything with anyone. So yeah.
Are you an introvert?
On a holiday, yes.
I'm
an extroverted introvert, which I don't even know if that's a thing, but what I like people. I'm not shy. I enjoy people, but I mostly prefer to be by myself.
Same.
Or if I'm around people, I need an awful lot of I need like triple the amount of time. It sounds like recover, but that's not the right word. But sometimes
you can be introverted and be social and like people. But I remember this from the MFA time. Like you would always need to retreat. You would need to go in the afternoon and just like go to yoga or go to your room or go for a walk and just like be alone. There are a few people who like one-on-one I really just love, but I have a hard time even when those individuals that I love, if we're hanging out together, I get overwhelmed in a group setting pretty quick.
Yeah.
An hour or two and I'm like I'm loving it, but I'm also like toast. Then I need to go like collapse for an hour or two on the floor.
My husband and I are still working through like what kind of person I am, right? Because I think he pictures me as like very social because it's easy, right? I don't find it. He has to work to, make conversation and he's very shy. And so he thinks, well, you're an extrovert. You love this. But I was trying to explain to him that if like even in the days where I went to like the bar, right, with all my friends, I loved the part where we just sat at someone's house and got ready. And I mean, I love dancing and music. So that part was good. But once we got to any social event, my favorite part, if I wasn't on the dance floor, because I I don't know, I love dancing. But if I wasn't there, I wanted to find a corner and just talk to one person. I was not, and that's still how I am. If I go to a party, we were at a birthday party last weekend and I'm like, Kate, you're going to have fun. You're going to talk to all these people and you're going to make a point of talking to people all night. And I went to the birthday party and talked to a few people. And then I was like, okay, that's enough of that. And I found a chair and I sat on the chair and like read books off the coffee table. And my husband went and talked to person after person after person. And it just felt like, okay, do you not see? This takes so much energy and I don't have it. And I feel uncomfortable and awkward. And I don't know, how do you wrap up a conversation anyways?
You say, I'm sorry, I really have to pee. And then you go to the bathroom and you close the door and you exhale and you put your head between your legs and you stay there for as long as you can without looking weird.
That's a good tip. Do you because I feel like if someone's talking to me, it's my job to like entertain them and make them feel heard and valued, I'm really present. And then that moment where they say, oh, okay, well, I think I'm going to go get another drink. I feel like I've failed and it's not that I want to keep talking to them, but I feel like I've just failed in keeping this conversation going and they got bored and no one ever wants to talk to me, obviously.
I don't think that's the case. I think it's just people realizing that maybe they worry that they're boring you. And so they're finding a way to extricate themselves or it becomes awkward.
They're like, she's so engaging and I'm running out of things to say. It's like me when I'm like, I got to go to the bathroom right now. Maybe
Don't talk about the bathroom anymore because I'll have to pee.
It's
a general perennial problem.
One of the things at my last church, my church closed. So yeah, it was sad. It was 1 month before the bookstore closed, the church closed. But it was a small church. So I was there for 10 years. So I pretty much knew everyone, but I'm still awkward and I'm still not great at making conversation and small talk and stuff. So my trick was I volunteered to like make the coffee and make sure the snacks were out. So that way I could be with the people, but I had a task. So it saved me from having to navigate the like chit chat part and decide when to move to the next person or what to do with myself when no one was talking to me.
That's really smart. You can be like, oh, I have to go check on the coffee, or do we need to brew a fresh pot, or are there enough cups?
Have a task with a little star. We'll have to put that in the show notes, Amy.
Yeah.
Danica's top 5 tips for navigating social situations.
As an introvert.
Danica, what's your biggest source of guilt?
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that because before I thought I had no guilt, and then I was like, I need to come up with a.
Sorry.
There's the little guilts, and then there's the big guilts, right?
Yeah.
The little guilts. I got a dog. I feel like guilty that I'm not a better dog owner.
Yeah.
I love my dog, but she wants a lot of attention all the time. And I'm like, I work at home, so she's not alone, but I'm like, I have to work. I can't play with you. Leave me alone. I feel guilty about that.
Yeah, dogs can induce guilt in people. You see them walking past my house all day, every day, all the time. So she's in good company.
Yeah, I think we also have a dog, and it's kind of like with the family thing. We love him and he can be really sweet, but we don't love to spend as much time with him as he loves to spend with us. And he can also be a pain in the ass. And then I have a lot of guilt over that because we have some friends who like their dog is everything. And
everybody
then
on Instagram loves their dogs.
Yes.
That's
and
not
I'm like,
true.
oh, I don't even know if I've ever posted my dog. Now I feel terrible. I should feel guilty that I don't post my dog. Kristen and I had this conversation one day, and we both feel really guilty that we don't love our dogs as much as some people appear to love their dogs.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. But then lots of dogs really are badly treated. So I'm like, it's my job to give her the best life that I can. And I try really hard.
Totally. And I think we come from the same idea. I'm like, we shower him with everything that he could possibly need. We give him affection and love. We just aren't letting him sleep in our bed. And,
it's my bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at this comfy bed I bought for you on the floor.
I know, exactly. And ours is a Chihuahua. So even if he wanted to get into our bed, he cannot. He can't jump up that high. So it works out for us.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
The built-in boundary.
And I don't feel guilty about that. But then I know so many people who are like, oh, we had to buy our aging dog steps so he could get up into our bed because he can't make the jump anymore. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, ours. Yeah, no. There will never be steps bought here.
I grew up with farm animals. We didn't have animals, but because most of the people in my life were farmers, animals are animals and dogs are dogs. I want to ask you though, Danica, is there any guilt around writing? Because that's sort of you're a writer. You owned the most gorgeous, perfect bookstore. You teach writing. Is there guilt around any of that you would want to share with us?
No, but I'll give you an antidote. Get divorced. No, just kidding. That's not the antidote. I recently have realized I'm in a very lucky position in my life right now as a writer. And I just have really, it's just been the last couple of days or weeks that I've been becoming aware of this. I remember younger, because I write a lot of personal stuff and memoir type writing. When, for the longest time, decades, as I was developing as a writer, I had a lot of I was really troubled because I was like, everyone in my life, I was so scared of offending my husband or my family or I don't know. But I've had some losses, which were relational, the divorce. That's a huge one. But also, some of my older family members, grandparents and stuff have passed away. And then I left the traditional workplace. When I left my marriage and I left the traditional workplace, I felt like I stepped out of, we talk about dismantling the patriarchy. I felt like I stepped out of the patriarchy and those power structures of the way that women are expected to be in different roles and scenarios. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time. But after I was out of it, I was like, oh, it's so freeing to just be me. It's amazing. And so now there's this gift that I've been given of this freedom, which allows me to basically say whatever I want to say and not have to worry about stepping on people's toes who I care about. Because you don't want to hurt people or cause rifts and stuff. But now I'm starting to think, I'm like, okay, well, as a writer, I now have this freedom that I didn't have for a long time. And a lot of people don't have, because I know that's, when we talked with other people in the MFA who are writing similar things, there's always a conversation about everything from the legalities of slandering someone right down to just the guilt of, will I make someone feel uncomfortable or whatever. So I'm feeling a bit of responsibility now to use. I'm like, okay, I've been given this gift to be able to write about whatever I want to write about. So maybe I'm feeling in the future, the future I want to move into as a writer, I don't want to look back with guilt on squandering that gift.
Oh.
Does that make sense? Like I feel a responsibility now to do a good job with my freedom.
I love
Wow,
that. Yeah, I love that.
incredible. That's incredible because you've taken that concept of guilt, which is kind of endemic to a lot of writers. I think it's just nonfiction, especially, right? And when it's memoir adjacent or the personal essay,
Yeah, personal
right?
essay.
It's what's my story, what's fair, and there's such a different views on that. But it's you've taken all of that just aside and said the guilt that I don't want to carry is the guilt that I've squandered this gift. And what a
Mhm.
different way to frame the thinking and conversation around what you're doing. That's beautiful. I love it.
Thanks. I just came up with it like last week.
It's brilliant. It's
I
good.
love that.
Test it out here. It feels good.
Mhm.
Feels really good. I like that. And it's important because just thinking back to that MFA, that was a never ending question, right? That
It
people were
was.
struggling with and that I still wonder, right? When I write, what's fair? I have on my Substack where I'm writing Cultivated and writing about growing up in the cult. And I have slowed down my pace of publishing because I have probably 50 drafts that are ready to go, but it's waiting. Okay, what's fair? Is it fair? Right? This is true, but is it fair? How guilty do I feel? But I feel like what you've kind of identified here could be really useful. It's just a different way of framing how we tell the stories about ourselves. Like, does it bubble up for you, Amy, even? Like when you talk about your mom,
Oh,
right?
I
Like
can
what's
never tell
fair?
my mom that I'm doing a podcast because she would happily listen to it all day long. But now I'm feeling like some of the things I'm saying will make her feel so hurt. And she is easily hurt. And there's a lot of guilt placed on us when she feels hurt because she tells us, oh, you're making me feel so sad. I
Oh.
feel like treat me like X and X and X, right? And it's like if she were to listen, even though it's true for me, what I'm saying, I wouldn't want her to be hurt. I'd feel so guilty because I
have
do
not.
love her. I do value her. But there are things about who she is or how she behaves as a person that grate on me, I guess. I don't know. And that's with everyone. You don't choose your family, right? Like if you have people in life that you don't like how they behave or whatever, you can choose to not be their friend or not be, but this is your family that you love still. And it's such a complicated thing.
And I guess it's like a little bit of like it's all going to be hazy forever in a sense, right? Is you're approaching this every conversation that I've ever had with you, whether it's on the podcast or even just privately, there's care and attention and love in how you speak about your family. And Danica, same for you. And I think that has to count for a lot because I might say something that, I identify something about my mom, like the religious guilt, right? I don't know if that would hurt her feelings or actually just give her more, right? Like, why is that a guilt? You should just be going to church, right? But if I said something and in my writing, I say things that my dad is also no longer here. He can't tell his side of the story, but it's my story and I do my best to be respectful and fair. It's probably not always going to come out in the wash as well as I'd want it to, but that's all I can do. But my intention is not to hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to count.
It does. I think it does.
For all of us, right? Like for any writer or person.
Amy, are you a writer too?
No, I've always
Yes.
no.
Yes.
I've always
tell
kind
me
of
what you did for school. Sorry.
Well, I have a master's degree in French literature.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm still fully
not a writer.
But I'm not. Well, I always liked to write and I always wished that I was a writer, but I don't write typically. I'll write things. No, I'm not. You're going to say imposter syndrome, but I'm not. I don't define myself as a writer because I don't have training and I haven't written stuff really.
Do you write?
Sometimes.
How often do you write?
Not often enough, probably. I think about things and then I'm like, that's stupid. And then I don't do it. So
are you writing as much as you would like to write? I think that's the main thing.
Probably not. But I mean, yeah.
Why? Let's turn the tables.
Let's talk about this.
Because I just wouldn't know what to write about. And I would feel like when I'm like, oh, my friend Kristen is a writer who's doing this podcast with me, I could never say that I'm also a writer because I'm not. I haven't published anything. I haven't written anything worth, a few personal essays once in a while just for my own, like just the act of writing because I enjoy it. But that's all.
I think I'm going to give you unsolicited advice.
Okay, I'll accept it.
Because spending time because I taught a few like writing classes at the bookstore, and now I do this like online, these little funny classes. One trick that helps sometimes when people are trying to make that transition to like if they're hesitant to like think of themselves as a writer or something, sometimes it helps to get your mind onto someone else and someone else's hobby or interest, like musicians. Like there are so many people who play, like they just took some lessons, they play for their own pleasure, they pick around at it, different varying levels of skill. Sometimes people write music, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll play at church, or sometimes they'll play in a pub, but they may or may not make money from it, or they may or may not do it every week, but they're a musician, right? They're a musician. Even if they only sit down and do it, on a Saturday afternoon with like a jam buddy.
And they wouldn't hesitate. They wouldn't hesitate. My mom is a pianist, right? She's never been paid for it. Well, and she's a singer. And maybe she made $50 doing somebody's wedding a few times, but she would not hesitate to call herself a pianist.
But I also sing and have sung for years, and I would never call myself a musician.
Why?
Because I thought about doing that. I almost went to university for music performance, and then I changed my mind. And I sang for years in church. I sang with my mom because my mom was a voice teacher and a singer. She did a couple of concerts when she was in her 40s because she'd always wanted to do some solo concerts. And so I think of her as a musician, but I don't write my own music. I don't I've sung in choirs for years, like that kind of thing, but I'm not.
Sound like a singer to me.
Me too.
I guess I just don't like to label myself. I don't know.
I think we have a lot of just the way our society is. We really like to think about it's capitalism. It's the market. We're always thinking about the market. So if you earn money as something, then you're like, oh, okay, that
official.
Totally.
It makes it official. But I think it's actually more about what you actually spend your time doing. If you spend your time singing, you're a singer. If you spend your time writing, you're a writer. If you go running,
you're a runner.
You jog around the lake 1 kilometer twice a week. You're getting there.
Danica, this is so good.
Interesting. Okay, you've given me a lot to think about because I actually have felt guilty for a long time. I don't know if Kristen told you, but I haven't had a paying job in several years. I've done the odd contract thing here and there and whatever, but it's I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But part of my problem is that what I want to be has to be attached to money in my mind. And so if I can't attach it to money, then it's not worth pursuing, which is a terrible way to look at things. But I feel like I had a lot of options and paths open to me when I was young that I didn't follow. And so now it's well, I can't be any of those things because I didn't choose that when I was supposed to choose that.
Yeah, I think it's hard for creatives. Yeah. And it's also hard for people who are now that my kids are grown up, I think about this a lot. Any kind of caring position. It's work, but it's not because it's your family. But then sometimes, but we don't just care. When we think about caring for family, it's not just our biological children. We care for, we have play dates and we have, that neighbor kid down the street who's being raised, who's kind of neglected, and you kind of adopt them and, and then it's then you're taking care of your neighbor. I don't know. And the care sort of we don't even talk about it as work really, but it takes time and effort and skill, and it's not easy. But, if you're spending a lot of time doing creative things and care, I think they're not the same, but the market devalues certain things. And so if you spend a lot of time doing those things that are not valued, it's hard to find that sense of identity if a lot of identity comes out of the market and money.
Totally.
Sorry, I feel like I'm getting a little preachy.
I like it though, because it's true. And that's very much how I feel. It's I don't want to label myself because I don't earn money doing those things, right? So then I would never say, oh, I'm this, because I haven't proven that I'm that because I haven't made money at doing that.
But it's not true. You probably do all kinds of amazing things really well.
Okay, well, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to think on it. Have you always been a writer? Is this something that you came to late in life? Did you always know this was something that you?
No, what happened was, so I went back to school after I had kids. I got married when I was 20. I had my babies when I was 22 and 24, and I went back to school when I was 25. But that was also like the early 2000s when blogging was brand new. And my friend made a blog and I was like, what's that? And then I made one. My first blog post was like my youngest daughter's first birthday. And so it was brand new. There were no
rules.
There were no rules about it. Like, we were inventing it as we went. And so I kind of became a mommy blogger at the same time that I went back to school. And I wound up, first I went back to school for like business administration because I felt once again, I had bought into the idea a little bit of like the church mom, focus on the family, stay at home mom with your kids is the right thing to do. You know, a woman belongs in the home, all that bullshit. I kind of had bought into that at a young age when I first kind of started going to church and stuff. So then I realized that was a bad situation for me. Long story. But I decided to go back to school, which was bad. Like, again, I was being bad.
Selfish Danica.
Expectations that I went back to school. And so but I did feel like I had to justify it. So I went back for business because business makes sense. And but then I quickly found out that it was not the right program for me. And I switched back to the arts and I felt like a complete failure. And I wound up doing a double major in philosophy and English. And like everyone, like my husband, my dad, everyone was like, what are you going to do with that? And I was just like, this is what I'm doing. Like, blinders on, ignore you people. Just like focus on getting my work done. And so, but those two things were very like writing intensive, like essays. And then I had this mommy blog on the side at home as a hobby. And writing just became something I was good at I was doing it constantly all day, every day in different forms. And I think that gave me a lot of flexibility also in what I could write because I was constantly changing up the type of writing I was doing. Because just like anything else, whether it's playing music or doing a sport, like it's a skill that you get good at by practice. And so I kind of became a writer accidentally without intending to. And then it took me 6 years to do my degree because I was parenting and working part-time. And then when school was over, I also kind of quit my blog at that point because the kids were getting older and I was starting to worry about their privacy and stuff. So, but then I had no outlet anymore and I had no deadlines anymore. But then I was in the habit and the urge was there. And I was like, now what? So I've been fumbling along ever since then because I like got an office job and I was like basically like an office manager kind of stuff for like 10 years. And then at about 6 years ago, I was still trying to write as a hobby. I was like trying to write a novel and that was hard. And I was trying to do this and that. But I was doing it like in my spare time, which there's no spare time.
No, you're parenting, you're working, yeah.
Exactly. Volunteering, like hanging out with the kids and their friends, like all the time, everything. And yeah, so about 6 years ago, I made the decision. I was like, okay, I've done enough for everybody else. It's time for me to start moving writing more toward the center of my life than the periphery. That was the initial decision. And so basically the last 6 years has just been trying to figure out what the next step of that is. And I'm getting closer.
Yeah, you sure are. Where can people find you? Because you teach.
Oh, yeah. Where can people find me? In this office here in Vancouver. Come for a visit. Yeah, come see me. Just kidding. On the internet. If you are a writer and you like writing, you can find me at Write with Danica Substack. Write with Danica on Substack. I put a few writing videos out every week, but I also would like to make a bit of a community there. I'm a writing coach also. That's sort of part of that, but I do one-on-ones with people. I've done some like editing work and like beta reading and like helping others develop their books. Right now I'm working with this pastry chef locally and we're like developing her cookbook. It's really exciting. So I like working with other people on their writing. So if that's, people can always find me. I have a website, danicas.ca. And then I'm on Instagram, but I avoid it like the plague because I have a personal Substack for my own writing, which I've only ever published once on. Because I used to blog all the time, but I wasn't a writer. But now that I'm a writer, there's like this huge pressure for it to be great, and I'm worried it's going to be terrible. So I haven't posted much.
I listen to a lot of writer podcasts. Well, no, I don't. A couple, but Megan Daum is one of my all-time favorites. And she talks about how she came up through that world. She's a little bit older than me. She had a column in, I think it was the LA Times. She published for New York Times, New Yorker, Vogue,
Amazing.
right? Like, and always had, and books. And so had editors and had write a piece, even a piece in a magazine or a newspaper would go through with an editor and revisions. And she kneecaps herself. She says this because she has such a hard time just pushing publish because she wants it to be perfect. And so she's really working at just saying, okay, you just have to do it.
Mm.
And that's how I feel, right? I can get stuck in that as well because I have Amy who critiques my work for me very well.
It's mostly just proofreading.
Fabulous editor, right? But I don't have that. So it's just me. And so I know that feeling of how do I think this is good enough a little bit? And no one else has really had eyes on this to say, whoa, none of this makes sense. So that's a tough world. But I encourage you, right? Like that feeling of blogging, I never had that feeling when I blogged. I never had that feeling of, I mean, maybe a little bit, right? Or maybe sometimes I'd catch an error later and I'd fix it, but I never had this inability. But now I can sit and ponder and wait because the expectation.
We put it on ourselves, but it's there. No one else cares.
They don't. You're right. And I feel like that expectation that we place on ourselves is just another form of guilt, really.
Well, yeah.
To be perfect. Like,
Well, how could I think that my work is good enough that I could just publish it without someone else saying this is good enough now?
Yeah.
It's like, who are you with so much hubris?
Well, on that note. Okay, Danica, I have a couple of fun questions to ask you. You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer if you're not comfortable answering, but do you have a guilty pleasure?
Yes, I was thinking, yes. My guilty pleasure is eating fat, tons and tons of fat.
I love it.
Like duck fat. What kind of fat? What's your favorite fat?
Oh, my favorite fat is like whipping cream, like in like the heavy duty 33% in the coffee every morning. It's glorious. And I was so afraid of fat, just like many people for so many years. And then I don't eat this way now, but I went keto for like 2 years, like 6 years ago. And it was so transformational. Like that way of eating really agreed with my body, my mind. Like I couldn't believe it. The whole, and it was just a bit of a like, oh, fat's not the enemy. And then I stopped eating keto just out of, it's too hard. It's like,
it's hard work.
Carbs are just so like cheap and easy and accessible and delicious. So every now and then I'm like, oh, I miss the way I felt when I was on keto. But what did stick with it, even though I went back to just like random eating, I kept eating all the fatty stuff because I was like, once I got used to not being afraid of it, like all the cheese, all the meat, I've never loved meat. I eat meat now, but I still like the texture with the fat on the meat gets to me, but I don't have a problem with it in my mind anymore. But the coffee cream, I'm just like guzzling it. And the people around me are horrified. And I'm like, I love to be like, it has no effect. Like I can eat it and love it and it's fine. I love that.
I love that. We go through vats of whipping cream in this house because my kids, right? Like they didn't grow up with that. Whipping cream is from the devil, cream, fat, right? So they don't have that layer. Like sometimes I'm amazed to see my kids, they write it on the grocery list every week, more whipping cream. They pour it in. I'm like,
The yogurt I buy is like 10% and my partner's horrified. I'm like,
And that's one thing I don't feel guilty about either, because weirdly, my mom, because she was such a health nut, but she also was like all about butter. Like we never had margarine. It was like, no, butter is good for you. Like whipping cream is great. Like, so that is thankfully one thing I can say that my mother did not make me feel guilty about. I was allowed to enjoy fats.
But it's still a guilty pleasure in a world where you still can get a lot of side eye about that. Like even from people you think,
Well, it's old science, and a lot of like it's old food science that fat's bad, but a lot of people haven't updated.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, the Canada Food Guide hasn't updated either. So there you go.
Exactly. So then if they're like wondering and they go to fact check.
Okay. And my other question for you is, do you have a guilty secret that you're willing to share?
I think my guilty secret is just my, like I did talk about all the ways I do feel guilty, but just my like this attitude. So anyway, the chef that I'm working with right now on this cookbook, she's like very punk rock. And so I've been remembering like punk from like back in the high school days and like that whole, I also in philosophy, I really liked like political philosophy and stuff. I really like anarchism, and I really like punk and like but the fact, like it's not, people think of these things as being very negative and almost violent or whatever, but it's actually just very like nonconformist and free. And that's how I am on the inside. And people sometimes don't understand that about me. So I think my guilty secret is just my dedication to living authentically. That's my guilty secret.
I love that.
I wish everyone felt like they could just authentically be themselves and have a good life. But I do.
Fantastic. You do though, right? Like I would have always said you're like a little bit rock and roll on the inside, but this is way more apt is to understand that it's not rock and roll, you're punk.
Yeah. It's actually this is my version of Christianity. This is me living out my faith. I'm like, I kind of just pay attention to what I think God wants and like block out the rest. That's me.
And unapologetically not feeling guilty about it, that you're just being yourself.
That's me. I know it's weird, but I like it. It's my guilty secret that I like it.
Love it.
It's a pretty great guilty secret. I'm going to have to think about that.
So, Danica, I know that actually I have not met you before, but I have seen you before because when Kristen told me a few years ago about this friend of hers who had this amazing bookstore in BC, I started following your Instagram account.
Oh.
And I love bookstores. We grew up with some pretty cool ones in Regina that my parents are, book lovers. We've read forever. That is ingrained in our family. My dad was an English teacher. I read voraciously. So bookstores for me have always been like this special, like absolutely special place. So I guess tell us a little bit about your journey being a bookstore owner and...
Oh, well, I could say a million things about that, but I was thinking about the bookstore, like getting ready for this interview. I was thinking about guilt because I was trying to think of what do I feel guilty about? And the biggest, I think after the bookstore closed, because the bookstore closed it was this gradual thing because at first I went just online and then I decided to shut it down. So it existed online for a few months before I fully closed. But so it was like 1.5 to 2 years ago. And after I made the decision to fully shut it down, like I kind of crawled into this like cave of, well, it was burnout and it was like depression and like grief, like and failure. But I actually was like a tremendous amount of like shame and guilt about letting down the community because there was all this community that kind of grew up in support of the bookstore. I was just in the middle of opening it when the pandemic came. So the community really rallied to just like kind of get me going and open. And there was a huge like push for shop local. And I felt like whether it was like the community of people, even like you just following and like cheering me on, even if they weren't someone I knew personally, but then even the people I knew personally, like the bank loan programs for small businesses kind of shut down. So people like lent me money because I was expecting to borrow through the bank, but it was individuals. So I had a bunch of like small personal loans, and then like friends like came and physically put their labor into like doing renos to fix things up and then all the people, like there were customers who spent more than they had to spend, I'm sure, like just single-handedly trying to keep me open with their dollars. And so when the bookstore closed, I just was like, I felt like I failed everybody.
That makes me so sad because I don't think that those people would feel that you failed them. They would feel like you gave them this gift for the time that you did, right? And brought joy. And I, even not knowing you, but following you because you were a friend of Kristen's, I was like, I want to go to this bookstore. Like,
Aww.
I love, hearing this woman talk about and be passionate about her beautiful little store. And I don't think that you failed anybody. I feel like those people would all say that you gave them a gift in the time that you had it.
Oh, thank you.
100%.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit better perspective on it now, but it took a long time.
Yeah. And that's why you had that community, right?
Mhm.
Anyone can kind of start a thing, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
you embodied everything that's good about books and bookstores and
You're kind.
then brought those people to you. And if anything, I think the guilt around this would be probably carried by the people who wanted nothing more than for this to succeed and feel like I didn't buy enough books, right? Yeah. It's
Oh, yeah.
yeah, right?
I
Because we
know.
know that you're not funding yourself, that it takes a village to make sure the bookstore stays open. So the
Yeah.
guilt doesn't belong on your end of it.
Oh, well, thanks. I did feel, I felt like I, could have done better. Like I don't know, in retrospect, in retrospect, there's nothing I could have done
Mhm.
to save it. Like there were things I could have done better, and that probably would have made the situation better and maybe extended the life of the bookstore by maybe a few more months. But I don't know if I had lots more time, I probably if I had a few more years, I probably could have. I would never say oh, the bookstore couldn't work. I just personally didn't have enough resources. Like I ran out of runway, and I could have made some other decisions that would have extended that runway, but I still think I would have run out of runway.
It wouldn't have been enough. Yeah. The time, energy, and money that you were pouring into it,
Yeah.
eventually you can't keep that up, right?
Yeah. I really should have had a business partner, is what I shouldn't have tried to do it on my own. I think that would have made the biggest difference. And I should have put more into marketing. I relied too much on word of mouth and my own abilities on Instagram and stuff.
Well, that's tricky stuff because that
Yeah.
all
But I
costs.
think it could work. I sometimes wish I wish someone else would try again in the same community. I think a bookstore really added to the community, and that I do think a bookstore could really flourish there. So if anyone's listening, Port Moody really could do a bookstore, just not by me.
Yeah.
But you're happy to consult.
Okay, that's right.
For a significant but affordable fee.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm glad we touched on that. I actually did want to touch on that, but I wasn't sure if you felt comfortable talking about it.
This has been fantastic.
Thanks for having me. I love chatting with you guys.